The first time I realized my life had been a lie, I was lying in a hospital bed, my body racked with exhaustion and pain, my heart heavier than anything I had ever carried. For 37 years, I had built everything: our home, our business, our daughter, every morsel of stability we ever had. And yet, Ethan, my so-called husband, had spent his life chasing dreams that never paid rent, never put food on the table, never noticed my sacrifices. On his deathbed, he clutched a small, smooth stone, whispering a name I had never heard before, a name that had haunted him more than the life we had built together: Claire. My body shook as I watched the nurses fumble, oblivious to the tremors inside me. And I realized then that all those years, my love, my endurance, my sleepless nights, had been invisible to him. Invisible and replaceable. Our daughter Grace sat beside me, reading a story Ethan had left behind. A story about Claire and a life that had never included me. And I could hear her words like knives slicing through the air. "Mom, don't you understand? He loved her more than he ever loved you. He spent 40 years thinking of her." And I wanted to scream, to pull her into my chest and tell her that the world was crueler than that love and loyalty were not interchangeable, that I had lived in the shadow of a man who could not even recognize the blood, sweat, and tears of the woman at his side. But the truth was, my voice was gone, drowned in years of resignation and bitterness. And when I finally let go, I felt the world slip away entirely. I opened my eyes, disoriented, and I was back, not in the hospital, not in the quiet grief of a life wasted, but in the moment Ethan had signed over the deed to my garment business. The old radio in the corner crackled with a song I recognized from my youth, a fleeting melody from the 1980s. And I realized with a jolt that I had been given a second chance, not to reclaim the life I had, but to live one where I could finally be the one in control. Ethan, oblivious to my return, was bustling through the courtyard, animatedly showing Grace a carved heart-shaped stone, the same one he had clutched for decades, as if his devotion to a memory justified all he had ignored in reality. I stood there, hands trembling, recalling the letters I had found after his death in my previous life. Letters he had never sent. Letters spanning decades of longing for a woman I had never met. And now, I could see clearly, the world had offered me a choice. I could let him continue his romanticized fantasy, or I could claim my life, my dignity, my freedom. The first days were agony and exhilaration intertwined. I confronted Ethan in the courtyard, and his eyes widened at my sudden presence, as if he had glimpsed a ghost. "Shannon?" he said, voice caught in disbelief, like he had seen someone else standing in the sun. I thought you..." I cut him off with a laugh that felt sharp enough to draw blood. "You thought I would let you ruin another 37 years of my life? You thought I would let you chase Claire while I rot in the shadows?" His face paled, and his usual arrogance faltered, the first crack in the facade he had built so carefully. Grace watched from the steps, her eyes wide, unsure whether to be terrified or fascinated, as the mother she had always assumed powerless suddenly transformed into someone she barely recognized but could not ignore. Ethan stammered, fumbling for words, but I would not let him speak, would not let him justify the decades he had spent blind to my existence. "You think your poetry, your lofty ideals excuse you? You think your dreams justify leaving me to manage everything?" I pressed closer, my hand gripping the carved stone he had never given me, the very symbol of the love he had stolen in another lifetime. He flinched as if struck. "Shannon, it was never..." I laughed again, bitter and low. "Never what? Never your fault? Never my pain? Never the years I sacrificed to keep us afloat while you drifted in a world of words and fantasies?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and then took a step back, suddenly aware of the force in my eyes, the storm that had been simmering quietly all these years. The days that followed were a tightrope of confrontation, strategy, and raw emotional reckoning. I refused to cook for him, refused to manage the factory, refused to be the ghost of the wife who had spent decades propping up his failures. Grace, caught in the middle, would sometimes cry, sometimes plead, sometimes hide behind his legs. And Ethan would turn to me, voice full of fragile indignation. "Shannon, this is for Grace. Surely you understand." I cut him off. "No, Ethan. Not anymore." Grace can see the truth. She doesn't need lies. You were never capable of honesty with her or with me. My words hit him like a whip, each syllable a memory of nights I had cried silently, of meals I had sacrificed, of dreams I had buried. One afternoon, I caught him pawing through my ledgers, pretending to manage finances he had never understood. "Ethan, don't touch that," I said, voice low and deadly calm. He flinched. "I'm just trying to help." I stepped closer, my gaze pinning him like a hawk. "You've done nothing but help yourself for 37 years. Everything here, every stitch, every order, every sleepless night, was mine. Don't forget it. I am not your assistant. I am not your caretaker. I am not your shadow. I am Shannon." His lips parted, but no words came. I could see the weight of recognition in his eyes, the first true acknowledgement that his negligence had consequences, that his romantic illusions had real victims. That evening, the confrontation escalated beyond words. He cornered me in the office, voice trembling with desperation and pride all at once. "Shannon, please. I can't survive this world without you. I need you." I laughed, a sound full of contempt and sorrow. "You need me? You needed me when your dreams were empty? You needed me when you were sick and broke? You needed me when I was the only thing keeping this life alive?" He recoiled, shame and disbelief warring on his face. I advanced slowly, deliberately, the fire in my chest eclipsing any remaining sentiment for the man who had betrayed me for decades. "You've spent your life dreaming of Claire. You've spent your life pretending to be a man of honor. And now, when the truth hits, you want me to carry you again? No, Ethan. Not this time. Not ever." Grace intervened, crying, but I did not soften. "Mom, don't!" she pleaded. I pressed my hand over hers, gentle but firm. This is what she needs to see. She needs to know that dreams built on someone else's suffering are not noble. They are selfish. Ethan fell to his knees, the image of a man finally seeing the weight of his own arrogance, the futility of decades spent avoiding responsibility. "Shannon, I didn't realize. I thought." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "Thought? Thought what? That the world would wait for your poetry? That I would wait too? That Grace would idolize your fantasies while her mother bled in silence?" The sound of his voice breaking, the rawness of his defeat, was almost cathartic, a release I had longed for in the quiet corners of my past life. I left him there, kneeling in the ruins of his illusions, and turned to the factory. I had work to do, a life to reclaim, a daughter to guide without being consumed by a man who had never truly been mine. I walked through the machines, each hum a reminder that I had built this world with my own hands. And now, for the first time, I would navigate it on my own terms. Ethan followed, pleading, bargaining, but I would not meet his eyes. Every word he spoke was a reminder of the years lost, the sacrifices invisible, the love unreturned. I could feel Grace's small hand slip into mine, a tether to reality, a witness to my resolve. Weeks passed, and the factory, once under my shadowy management, began to thrive in ways I had only dreamed of. I negotiated deals, trained workers, and transformed our modest operation into something remarkable. Ethan tried to interfere, tried to charm Grace, tried to tempt me with nostalgia, but every attempt was met with my steel-hard resolve. One night, he cornered me again, in the empty courtyard under the silver moonlight, voice breaking. "Shannon, I don't have anyone else. I can't." I stared at him, unflinching. "Then this is your lesson, Ethan. You can't demand life from someone who has already given you everything. You are alone because you chose it, because you failed to honor those who were always loyal. And now, you must live with that." By the time Grace had fallen asleep that night, Ethan was gone from our lives, reduced to a cautionary figure of selfishness and poetic arrogance. I sat in the courtyard, heart pounding, a mixture of exhaustion and elation flooding me. For decades, I had carried his dreams, his desires, his illusions, and now, for the first time, I carried my own. I could finally breathe, finally live, finally love myself without betrayal lurking in every corner. Years later, I would watch Grace grow, strong and self-sufficient, aware of her father's failings and her mother's triumphs. And I would smile quietly, knowing that in a world full of illusions, I had seized the one truth that mattered: my own life. Ethan faded into memory, a shadow of the man who had once claimed my heart, a relic of a life I would never relive. I had fought, I had conquered, and I had lived. And finally I was free.